Hey guys, I wanted to really quick address something that I've been asked many times throughout the years while I was running this channel, Horror and Coffee. And the question is this: Ralph, you're a man of faith. You are Catholic. You always talk about that. You always talk about your Catholic faith, how, you're into your faith. You go to mass. You have a lot of knowledge about the faith. How do you watch horror movies? Right? So people have bugged out on me like with that. Like I've had people like question even how I can be a Christian and still watch movies like The Exorcist or Halloween or Friday the 13th or movies like that. And I think that the question validates this quick video. I'll try not to be too quick, try to be too long on it, but I will tell you this, and maybe some background is necessary. You see, when I was young, I didn't grow up in my Catholic faith. I was only Catholic by name, like I was baptized as a baby and all those kind of things. But my parents were not churchgoers. I did not. The closest thing to being a real practicing Catholic was my grandmother, God rest her soul. And so anything I learned about God initially was from her. But then when I got older, I started like getting interested in the things of God, and particularly this fascinating thing about the devil and Satan and all that kind of stuff. And then when I watched The Exorcist for the first time as a 12-year-old on TV, and mind you, that was the censored version back then. I was 12. I couldn't sleep a wink that night because I was traumatized. And back then when I was a kid, scary movies were literally scary for me. I didn't really, take too well for them. But then, as I got older and I started exploring my Catholic faith by doing my first communion and my confirmation much later than the usual age range. I was 16 when I did my first communion. I was 17 when I did my confirmation. So, and then I got involved in youth ministry and church activities and things like that from my parish in the South Bronx. But at the same time, I would go home and watch The Omen and Halloween, and then I rented The Exorcist, fell in love with the movie. I have my copies right here, you know, um, and I continue to watch these films, and I review them here on Horror and Coffee, but people are kind of critical, a little bit critical, and not understanding how me as a man of faith could watch movies like that when it can be considered demonic or sinful or evil. A lot of these movies are rated R, not suitable. And I understand the concern. I get the gist of it. But here's my take on it. This is my personal experience. And this is the way I kind of have been able to approach the whole dilemma, if you could call it that. I take watching horror movies, akin to just somebody watching, or reading a good story, a good novel. I was first exposed to The Omen by reading the novel when I was a freshman in high school. And I loved the book so much that when the movie came out on TV, I watched it that night and I said, like many people say, well, the book is better. But I started watching the other ones, Omen 2, The Final Conflict, and everything. And then I saw The Exorcist, I saw Exorcist 2, I saw Exorcist 3. As I got older, I was just like lured and pulled into these stories, not for the sake of the scare factor. And I didn't think, some people think that if you watch The Exorcist, you're gonna get possessed, like it's as if it's simple like that, and that's not how it works in reality. And because happen to know a thing or two about possession and real case scenarios of that, alleged scenarios, and watching and reading books from actual exorcists and priests I've known, that's not how it works. These are just movies. It's just a movie. Some of these movies are based on alleged true incidents. The Exorcist is a movie like that. The Amityville Horror is a movie like that. The Conjuring is a movie like that. So you're gonna have those stories, but then you're gonna have other stories like the Pope's. Well, actually, the Pope's Exorcist is vaguely based on true events. But I've read that book, An Exorcist Tells His Story by Father Gabriel Amorth, and there was nothing in that book, in the movie, about that. So, you know, but there are exorcism movies, and there are like slasher. I mean, Halloween. That was John Carpenter's invention, and it set off a whole tirade of masked serial killers throughout the 80s, that we've all come to know and love, from Freddy Krueger to Jason to, Pinhead. You're all of a sudden, and these are, Pinhead is a supernatural being, Freddy's a supernatural being, Jason became a supernatural being. So it's like it's these are just stories. Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite franchises, right up there next to Star Wars, was written by a Catholic. J.R.R. Tolkien was a practicing Catholic, and he incorporated a lot of the faith-based materials of the Catholic faith into the story of the Lord of the Rings. If you watch Lord of the Rings, you see it in the movie. I've tried reading the book. It's a hard read. I'll be honest with you, but I love the movies. I love Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King. And they gave me such an incredible, wow, about the struggle between good and evil. And most movies are about that, isn't it? There's a protagonist and an antagonist. And sometimes the bad guys win, sometimes the good guys win. Bless the Child, a supposed horror movie starring Kim Basinger and Jimmy Smits, is a movie where good triumphed, where God triumphed over evil. If you see Bless the Child by Jimmy Smits and Kim Basinger, you know what I mean. I'm like, wow, that was Catholic based too. That was kind of hot. I really appreciated it and loved a movie like that. When I see how The Conjuring ended with good prevailing at the end, I like that too. In the 70s, there wasn't so much of that. In the 70s, there was the bad guys always winning. Damien survived and Robert Thorne died and all that. And The Exorcist left you wondering whether or not it was a true defeat of evil. And that's something that William Friedkin, to his credit and to his own words, left that to the audience to decide for themselves whether or not good or evil won in that case. Father Karras dying and everything. So and I appreciate stories that engage you, that I've appreciated stories that have engaged me and made me think a lot. And if anything, many of these stories have helped reaffirm my faith in God, my faith in Jesus. As a Catholic, as a believer, that I've gone through so many different life experiences that have given me hope and have given me despair and have hurt me. But and I still go through these things to this day. This is we believe as Christians that we're only in this world for a while, and this is a pilgrim's progress to eternal life. And there's nothing like the experience of going through life, work, friends, family, relationships, marriages. All of these things have had an impact on me personally in negative ways and in positive ways. Horror movies, along with dramas, comedies, sci-fi. I love my sci-fi. Aliens, right? All of them, all the genres of film engage you, are an attempt to engage you in storytelling, to help you think and think of the good things. Now, the reason why I appreciate those kind of films and not other kind of films that are like more graphic, like say Mother's Day or I Spit on Your Grave, exploitation, violent exploitation films, not too big on those, because they cater more to a darker side of reality. But I prefer what's not so real, or if it's based on true events, like something like The Exorcist or whatever, then but it gives you a glimmer of hope. It gives you something to hope for, to pray for, to remember, and what it is that we hold dear as people. Okay, we have that innate ability, and I don't like to be put in a box. It's the same reason why it's okay for me to have an occasional, and I barely drink. I have sometimes a glass of wine, I have a beer, in a social event and all that kind of stuff. But there are some Christians that will tell me, "Oh, you're not supposed to drink. You're a Christian." It's the same idea. You know, you don't, as long as you don't abuse what you're doing, then you're not committing anything wrong. I'm not abusing my love for these movies any more than I'm abusing my love for, you know, I don't know, a Seagrams, and that's a very light alcoholic drink. I also happen to like red wine, the sweet type, French, and I also happen to like, amaretto sour with orange juice. I'm not always drinking the stuff. I'm not like that's not. I don't do that, and I don't drink it to the point that I get like all stupid. That's not me. That's not who I am. You know, in the same way, I can watch all these movies. I can watch Christine. I can watch The Omen. I can watch The Conjuring. I can watch Halloween 1, 2, 3, all the Halloweens, all the Friday the 13th. I can watch Jaws. I can watch Star Wars. I can watch Alien. I can watch Godzilla, big Godzilla fan. Like all of these stories, all of these movies are about fear, horror, but also about hope and about how, and that's the way I've always taken them. You know, like what's the human element? You have the human element of fear, but you also have the human element of courage, of bravery, of hope, and yes, in many of those horror movies, of faith. And I think it's a great thing. It's helped. If anything, they've been aids, not the means. Of course, my real means is prayer, scripture, going to mass. That's my meat and potatoes. This is just supplemental. This is just supplemental vitamins. Watching these movies, reviewing them for you here on YouTube, so that you can enjoy and see for yourself what these are. So that's kind of my whole stint on why I have been able to reconcile my love for horror movies with my faith. You know, so let me know what you think. Comment below on where you stand on that. What do you, if you're a person of faith, do you share what I said, or do you have a different perspective that you want to give and that maybe I haven't thought of? So please let me know below. This is a real quick, I just want to let you know about that. So this is Ralph Perez, Horror and Coffee. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for future horror movie reviews and more things to come here on the channel. Until next time, this is Ralph Perez, Horror and Coffee. Take care.